Right. We started last week in 1 Peter, and we're going to continue on through that. On Wednesday nights, we'll do 1 Peter, and then we'll do 2 Peter. But tonight, we're going to look at 1 Peter 1, 3 through 9. 1 Peter 1, 3 through 9. It says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to His great mercy, He has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Though you have not seen Him, you love Him. Though you do not now see Him, you believe in Him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls." Look at what he says here when he says it is according to His great mercy. I have a feeling that we would really understand the mercy that God has shown to each of us as believers if we were able to sit down in a room and turn on a video and it showed us every time we had sinned in our lives. That would be a long video, wouldn't it? It'd be a long video for us to sit and watch every time we had sinned, every thought we had had that had gone amiss, every time that we told even just a little lie, every time that we didn't honor God with what we were doing. All those times that we sinned, if we watched it and we just watched it through one time, it would probably take us half our life to sit there and watch it if we watched it in real time. And I think then we would understand how great His mercy is. It's great mercy that He forgave all of that and gave us salvation. And it was through His great mercy, notice what it says here. He says in verse 3 that He has caused us to be born again. Interesting choice of words, isn't it? We talked last week about the election and about the foreknowledge of God and the sanctification of the Spirit and how it was God who put us where we are. It was God who caused our salvation. We talked about how Jesus had talked about in John chapter 6, how He talked about that no man comes to me unless the Father bids him to come, and everyone that the Father bids to come to me will come to me, and everyone that does come to me, I won't lose them. I will have them all to the end. And here's the same way. How were we born again? Yes, through our faith. Through our faith we were born again. But why did we even have that faith in the first place? It's because God called us to that faith. God said, you have been chosen as a believer. You will go and you will come to faith. You will be born again. It's one of those things that's very difficult for us as human beings to wrap our mind around. How we could say, you must be born again, but when God says you must be born again, you shall be born again. We try to figure out in our mind, how could it be a decision that we come to in faith, that it's something we decided to follow Jesus? When we sing the song, I have decided to follow Jesus, no turning back. How can that be true? But when God also called us to Him, and as Jesus said, that when He calls us to Him, that we don't turn Him down. That we can't turn Him down. It's an amazing thing to think about, and we can't get it all straight in our heads. And I think it's going to be an amazing thing when we get to heaven, when we can fully understand it. That He has called us, and that He caused us to be born again. Born again to what? To a living hope. Not a dead hope. Not a dead hope, but to a living hope. There's a difference between the hope that Peter's talking about here and the hope in the way that we use the word all the time. What's the weather going to be like this weekend? Well, I hope it's not too rainy. We say that all the time, don't we? I'll see you next week. I hope so. All right? We say that because we don't know for sure. But what he's talking about here, if it was God according to his great mercy and that he caused us to be born again to a living hope, that hope is secure. That hope is sure. It's a hope that we have that's not a maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. It's a hope that we can look forward to, that we know will happen with great certainty. How do we have that living hope? How were we born again to that living hope? He says, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Jesus rose again. And so Jesus from death, born again. And now what are we? From death, born again. And he says that through that, we go to an inheritance. And he calls the inheritance imperishable. Something that doesn't go bad. Something that doesn't go bad. You ever been upset when you got something out of the cabinet and then looked at the date on it? I've done that before. I got upset the other day when I was at CVS, and I was waiting for them to fill the medicine so that I could get rid of the gout that I'd had all weekend. And I was sitting there and waiting, and I said, I'm going to go on over there and see. Look, they've got cherry juice, because I've always heard that if you drink tart cherry juice that it'll help reduce uric acid and it'll help you out. And I said, look at this. They've got a nice 64-ounce bottle of tart cherry juice. I said, I'm going to get that, and then I'm going to go sit in the car and I'm going to drink it. So I go in and I get it and I pay for it and I walk out and I sit down and I look over, and it expired in June of last year. And I decided I didn't think that I wanted to drink that, right? I'm not sure, it might have been fermented by that point. I said, I'm not going to drink that. So I took it back in, and then, it was be different. Like today, getting there, it's a minor inconvenience. Walking back into the store with a full-on gout flare was not fun. And so, but I found some cherry juice somewhere else. But it expired. It perished. It was a perishable good. But not our faith. Not our inheritance that we get by being born again in Him. It's imperishable. There is no expiration date on our inheritance to eternal life. It is also undefiled. You get ready to eat something, and then you accidentally drop it in the floor. Makes it sad. It's sad because it gets, it might get a little something on it, or, gosh, the worst thing. I don't know which is worse. To have a hair in your eggs or an eggshell in your eggs. I think to have an eggshell, honestly. There's something about when I'm eating scrambled eggs and I bite into it and it crunches. Ugh. I just don't like that. I was eating at a restaurant. I won't name it since we're going to put this on the internet. It wasn't around here. It was a ways down out of Johnston County. And I was eating breakfast, and I went to their breakfast buffet and loaded up some eggs on the plate, and I sat there and ate it, and I said, what is that? And I pulled it out. It was a hair about this long. It was intertwined in those eggs. Somebody said, well, gosh, what'd you do? Just go get something else to eat? I said, no, I'd already got the hair out of them. I went ahead and finished the rest of the eggs. But you don't like that, right? Because it's defiled at that point. And you think about something being defiled, and you think about our souls being defiled by the sin that we have. But not the inheritance that we have when Jesus caused us to be born again, because He says it is undefiled and it is unfading. You ever had that favorite shirt that you wore over and over and over again, and over time, what starts to happen to it? It fades. Not this inheritance. It doesn't fade. It's imperishable. It's eternal. It's undefiled. It's always clean. Cannot be dirty. It is unfading. Always strong. And how? How was that? It's kept in heaven for us, he says, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. How can our inheritance be imperishable, undefiled, and unfading? Because it is God who has kept it. It is God who has said, this will not be defiled, this will not perish, this will not fade. It is God's power through our faith that has made our inheritance so sweet, so eternal, and so perfect. Does that mean everything's going to be easy? I think a lot of people think, if I just become a Christian, everything will be good. No, it's still a hard life. Still have a hard life. He says, we rejoice, in verse 6, that we rejoice in that salvation. We rejoice in that inheritance. But even now, for a little while, we're grieved by various trials. The trials we go through every day. And the trials that the early church was going through, they were hiding so they didn't get killed. There are Christians all across this world that are hiding so they do not get killed. And who knows, even one day in the United States of America, we might have to hide so that we're not killed. We go through those trials, and we go through challenges to our faith. We have fear that comes in that makes us doubt our faith. We have fear that comes in even sometimes to make us slip in our faith, like we talked about on Sunday, where even Abraham, the godfather of faith, the one that we all say, we're a child of Abraham. Father Abraham had many sons, and that we're all children of his through the faith, the same faith that he had. Even as faithful as he was, he still slipped up. He still had times he didn't trust God. And sometimes we will go through those trials. But what are those trials for? Verse 7 tells us to test the genuineness of your faith. To test how strong your faith is. That's why we go through those trials. You ever watch the TV show Forged in Fire? You ever watched that before? It's a great show. I love to watch it. I can't remember if it's on History Channel or A&E or whatever it's on. But they have this contest where they bring in 3 or 4 guys, and they all have to make a knife. And they have to make the knife, and it has to stand up to a strength test and has to meet certain specifications. And they try to see who is the best ironsmith that there is, the best blacksmith that there is, who can do it. And one of the things that's interesting that they always talk about at the end is they're like, you got to cure it right. Right? You got to get this right. At the very end, you have to heat the metal up really, really hot. Like they have their whole design done. And then they stick it back there in the fire, and they let it sit and let it sit and let it get so hot. And then they take it out and they immediately dunk it down in oil. And it just smoke everywhere and the steam comes out. And the reason why they have to do that is because if you don't, the first time that you take that knife or you take that sword or you take that axe that they're making and you hit something with it, it breaks. And our faith is the same way. Imagine if you became a believer and you went through life and you never had any trials and you never had any temptations for the first 15 years of being a believer, and then you hit your first trial. How strong do you think your faith is going to be? Not very strong. But if you've gone through trial after trial after trial, even if they're little ones, and God has brought you through every time, then when you hit that big trial, what are you going to be able to do? Withstand it. You're going to know, as he says, the genuineness of your faith that will be more precious than gold, more pure than gold. That's how you purify gold, as you run it through the fire over and over and let all the impurities burn out. That is how God purifies our faith, is by letting us go through the trials of this life. And those trials also result in praise and glory and honor to Him. What does our faith mean? I think verse 8 is a pretty good definition of faith. Though you have not seen Him, you love Him. And though you do not see Him now, you believe in Him. It's a pretty good definition of faith, isn't it? I have never seen Jesus Christ. I have never seen God's face. But I love Him. And right now, I don't see Him. I could search all over this earth and I could not find Jesus. Not in the flesh. But do I believe in Him? Yes. Because that is what faith is. Faith is believing in that which we can't see. Does that mean that our faith is ridiculous and that it's a guess? No. The world points to Him. Creation points to Him. The Bible points to Him. The Bible is logical and the Bible is sound. But still it requires faith. It requires faith. And faith is loving and believing without seeing. And what is the outcome of our faith? He tells it to us in verse 9. The salvation of your souls. Why do I have to go through trials? Because I have faith. If you go through the Christian life and you never have a trial, maybe you're not going through the Christian life. If you never have something that tests your faith, how do you know your faith is genuine? James tells us that we should test our own faith. We should test ourselves to see if we're in the faith. And we need to do that. As we go through life, we need to remember that He saved us and He is saving us. And He is saving us to the salvation of our souls. And that is the outcome of our